Welcome to The Truth About Real Estate. I'm Erin Blaze, and today we're talking about home inspections. My guest is Bill McAllister, an inspector in Mid-Missouri with over 9 years of experience. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
The first question I have for you is, what is a home inspection?
Well, a home inspection is an objective visual examination of the physical condition and systems in the home. An inspector will provide a written report that describes any visible defects and conditions that may affect the function or safety of the home. Home inspectors do not do any destructive testing, nor do they have x-ray vision. We cannot see into walls, under floors, or under other inaccessible areas. However, the inspection is like a medical checkup, and if a problem is found, I would refer the home buyer to a specialist in that area.
Okay, so then when you say it's a visual inspection, there's things that you couldn't see, so you wouldn't really know whether there's a problem or not. For example, the sewer system. Would the sewer system not be covered?
That's correct. The sewer system would not be covered. However, during the inspection, we would get clues to its performance. And if we suspect that there is a problem, then I could refer the home buyer or home purchaser to a plumber that would have the ability to, say, run a camera through the sewer system and see what is going on.
Okay, all right. And what about, sometimes when people are purchasing a home, usually the current owner is still living there and there's lots of stuff in the house. Do you actually move the stuff?
I will move small items or items that could be moved easily without causing them any harm. If it is a big item, I would probably say that that item was there and I could not inspect behind it. Might also ask that it be moved while I was at the inspection so I could come back and look at it later, or could come back and look at it at a different time.
Okay. And who needs inspections? Do people buying new homes still need inspections?
Yes, people buying new homes need inspections. I find lots of things wrong with new homes. Not all new homes, and I don't find the same thing in all homes. But for example, I have found electrical receptacles that didn't work. I had one case where I was looking in the attic and I found some insulation. About half the home did not have insulation in it. When I told this to the builder, he went out to his truck, got his records, and showed me a receipt where he had actually paid for the insulation, and he was really surprised that it wasn't up there. Other things that I find, plumbers quite frequently will cut through floor joists when they shouldn't. There could be problems with a roof possibly leaking in the future. New homes do have problems, yes.
Okay, all right. And do you ever have people that want to sell their home, for example, a seller that will get their house inspected before they put it on the market to find problems?
Yes, I do have some home inspections like that. It is a good idea for a seller to have a pre-sale inspection. That way any defects can be found and the seller can either fix them before he puts the home on the market, or he can list them and let the potential buyer know that they exist, and he may fix them later, or the buyer at least knows they're there and can offer a price that includes that defect. Sometimes if a pre-listing inspection is done, it even helps the home sell quicker.
I would agree with that. From the point of view of a realtor, when you take someone in the house and they already have the inspection report there, that can make the buyer worry a lot less about the condition. I'm curious about the professional association you're in, the ASHI group, because
Yes.
we recommend ASHI inspectors, but I don't really know that much about the association.
Okay, well, I might comment on that in conjunction with how would a potential home buyer choose an inspector. You would obviously want an inspector with some training and experience. At the present time, the state of Missouri does not license home inspectors. So it's critical to kind of investigate or check on a home inspector before you would ask them to do a home inspection. Obviously, you would want one with several years' experience, and who had attended a home inspection training school. For example, if it's a franchise home inspector, he may have attended the franchises training. If he's an independent home inspector, there are varieties of accredited home inspection schools around the United States that he could have attended. Also, you should get a full-time home inspector. Generally, a full-time home inspector would carry insurance, general liability and errors and omissions insurance that would cover any problems that would come up. Now, in regard to the ASHI organization, which I'm a member of, there are actually several professional society organizations in the United States. Some of the Missouri home inspectors belong to ASHI, which is the American Society of Home Inspectors. Some inspectors belong to NAHI, which is the National Association of Home Inspectors. Some belong to NACHI, which is the National Association of Certified Home Inspectors. They're all very similar. However, ASHI, the American Society of Home Inspectors, is the oldest and largest home inspection group. It's been around the longest. The requirements for that professional society are that you have completed at least 250 paid inspections. You have sent in a copy of 50 inspections to the organization for review to see if they comply with their standards and their code of ethics, and that you have taken a National Home Inspector exam and passed it. So that's pretty much what ASHI is, and that gives you an idea of why you should choose a home inspector that belongs to one of those membership societies.
Right, because one of the things I've found that was kind of interesting is people will, you know, I tell buyers to choose their own home inspector, but I don't want them to just go pick anyone that doesn't have any training, any experience, or really any business out doing home inspections at all. But there are people that will just, you know, take out an ad in the Yellow Pages and say they're a home inspector when they don't have any training or expertise. And you're a member also, well, you're a pillar to post home inspector. Now, do they have special training? Does Pillar to Post offer special training?
Yes, it is a franchise, and it required an initial training period of 2 weeks. And then they require, like the professional society, 20 hours of continuing education every year.
Okay. And the home inspection that you do, that you give this written report of, it looks like it's a structural and a mechanical inspection, but the termite is separate. Now, to do a termite inspection, is that a separate type of training that you go through or licensing?
Yes, it is. The state of Missouri does license and provide training for termite inspections. It is through the Department of Agriculture, and there is an initial training period and a test that you have to take and pass. You have to renew your license every 3 years. The reason that the termite inspection is kind of separate from the home inspection process is it used to be that lenders would require the termite inspection just on all home sales. They don't do that so much anymore, but some of them still do. Termites are a big issue around here. We have subterranean termites, and they nest in the ground. Some of the nests may contain 1 million termites or more. When they do get into a house, they can cause a lot of damage over a period of time, and that damage is usually concealed for the most part. So part of the training for a termite inspector would be the termite biology and how they behave, so that you would know where to look for them and how to find them.
Okay. Another home inspection topic that gets a lot of hype on television is mold. Do you do mold inspections as well?
I do mold inspections. Mold is kind of a touchy subject right now. A lot of people are very alarmed when they hear the word mold. Some people are not. The issue with mold is everybody's reaction to it is different. Some people could swim in mold and it wouldn't bother them. Other people could get close to mold and it would be very health hazardous to them. I don't necessarily push a mold inspection. What I usually recommend is if there is visible mold in a house, that you get rid of it. Remove it and renovate the area that the mold was in, and that should take care of it. However, if you don't necessarily see mold, but you suspect mold, it smells musty or moldy, you have allergic reaction when they go in the house or something like that, then it would become necessary to do mold testing, but only in those cases. I don't just recommend doing mold testing from the very beginning.
Okay. Well, how do you test for mold if you can't see it, but you can smell it and it smells musty?
Well, there's two ways of doing mold testing. If you do see it, you take a swab test where you physically swab the mold with a sterile swab, and you send it off to a laboratory for analysis. If you don't see mold, then you have to do air testing. You take an air sample where you vacuum air through a very fine filter that is provided by the testing laboratory for a set period of time to get a certain volume of air through that filter. You do this outside and you do it inside. There's mold everywhere. There's mold outside all the time. So you have to subtract out the amount of mold and the kind of mold that's outside in the exterior from what you get on the inside. And taking the inside and outside numbers, you can see if there's an enhancement or an increase in the number of particular mold types in the house. And that would tell you if there is a mold issue.
Okay. And I'm assuming if there's a low level that shows up, you're probably not going to have a problem with being ill or allergies.
Most likely not. There is, as I said, mold everywhere, so you're going to find it in all locations. There are certain types of mold that are known to be hazardous to humans, and small amounts of that type of mold may cause problems with some individuals who are sensitive to mold. Mold generally is more of a problem for the very young or the elderly.
Okay. Well, in my experience, as in the last 13 years of being a realtor, I think I've only had one client that actually had to do mold remediation. So whenever I see things on television about how mold is prevalent and dangerous, and it just makes me think that that's a lot of hype on television, and for the most part we shouldn't be too worried about it.
I would agree, for the most part we shouldn't be too worried about it. However, there are those few individuals that do have allergic reactions to mold, and you know, for them it is a real problem. But for the majority of the population, it's not a problem.
Okay. Well, besides termites, which are really common, what do you think some of the other most common house problems are?
Well, in existing homes, there's a variety of things that I find. For example, one of the biggest problems in this area is drainage. We have an expansive clay soil here that when it gets wet it expands. If you do not have good drainage or movement of water away from the home, then that water next to the foundation causes our soil to expand and generally cracks or causes problems with the foundation of the home. And that's one of the big problems that's somewhat unique to this area. I find electrical problems, and this is in existing homes. I find electrical problems where maybe somebody's remodeled and not done the electrical correctly. There are even certain types of electrical panels in use that are no longer allowed. One particular kind is called a Federal Pacific electrical panel, and it has never completed the underwriter's laboratory listing process and does have some problems with the circuit breakers. They will not trip when they're supposed to and have caused fires in homes. So whenever I see an electrical panel like that, I recommend it be replaced for safety. I find plumbing leaks. Quite frequently, if a house has been vacant for a period of time, some of the plumbing fixtures will dry out in it, and when you run water, they will leak. That's fairly common. Broken pipes. For some homes, I find what's called an S-trap, which is a trap in the drain line underneath the sink that can allow the water that's in that trap to siphon out and sewer gases to come back up through, where you'd have a sewer gas smell in the home. I find insulation quite frequently in older homes that's inadequate for today's energy requirements. 2, 3, 4 inches of insulation, where now they require or recommend at least 12 inches of insulation, which is considered an R38 to 40 energy factor. Rot and wood in various locations, cracked rafters in the attic, improperly installed roofing. You know, here recently, a year or so ago, we had some extensive hailstorms, and a lot of roofing companies came through that don't exist any longer, and some of that roofing was installed incorrectly. When you get to new homes, there's even problems in new homes. Hopefully not many, but I have found when I was in the attic of a new home where the roofing company had put tar paper over the vent so that the vent wasn't actually there. They put the vent on, but there was no opening for it. So the attic was improperly vented. I found electrical receptacles with no electricity to them. And these are all things that can be easily fixed. I found plumbing drains that are plugged with construction debris. And again, I found like floor joists where the plumber has gone through and put a drain line in. He's notched the floor joist so much that it no longer provides the support that is required. But they're not all found in any one home, but I run across that type of deficiency occasionally.
That's a lot of problems. That's a lot to think about. Well, have you ever been in a house and you couldn't find anything wrong with it?
I have been in a few houses where I have not found anything wrong, and I don't try to find things wrong in a house. I'm just looking at a house to see what it shows me. And yes, occasionally I do find homes that have no problems.
Well, that's awesome. All right. What about, I know you're familiar with the building code because you know so much about construction. Do you let people know if there's code deficiencies?
Not exactly. I'm not inspecting for the building codes. A building code inspection would typically be done during the construction, and it would be done by a city building inspector. I'm not a licensed city building inspector. The inspection I do is based on the codes, but so many of the items that are in the building codes are concealed once the construction is finished. They're hidden behind walls, they're underground. You just can't see them during the type of inspection I have to do. So no, it's not a code inspection, but we can infer a lot of things about the building codes by what we do see during the inspection process.
Okay. One of the things you do that's really nice is you give people this written inspection report, and it has photos of all the defects. Well, anything that you find in the house that concerns you. Did you want to tell us any more about this inspection report that you give?
Sure. Well, one of the jobs of a home inspector should be to educate the home buyer. It's not just to find defects. So I do try to give a complete report. That is a typewritten report that ranges from, I don't know, 25 to 30 pages in length. Includes a summary of the major items. I also provide this information to the purchaser in a 3-ring binder that contains my business card, contains a CD that it has a lot of home improvement ideas and tips on it, provide the report. All my home inspections are conducted following ASHI standards of practice, which spells out in great detail what we're required to look at and what we're not required to look at. I provide a copy of the ASHI standards of practice to the buyer. I also provide a seasonal maintenance checklist and various envelopes for home records should the buyer want to keep those in the report 3-ring binder. Additionally, I like to give the buyer an idea of various costs of repairs and remodeling type issues. So I do provide a list of cost items for remodeling. It's taken from some of the journal literature, so it's kind of generic in nature. I do recommend that if you're going to have some work done that you get 2 or 3 different estimates and not just go on the first one you find. But you know, it's all part of the education process for the home buyer, and I want to make it as pleasant and educational as possible.
I noticed you did have a place in here where people could put their utility bills.
Yes.
And that's kind of interesting because obviously if you keep track, you might realize you have a problem. Like if your water bill goes from $40 to $200 in 1 month. So this is a way for people to kind of monitor things that are happening in the house.
I will tell you a little interesting story about utility bills.
Okay.
Had a home inspection that I conducted on a repossessed home, and
When you say repossessed, you mean it was taken back by the bank?
It was taken back by the bank,
Okay.
and it sat there vacant for quite a while. Well, somebody, I don't know who, after it was vacant, stole the air conditioner, and they also stole the furnace, which was unusual. Usually they don't steal the furnace. But in this case, they stole the furnace. I inspected the home and, mentioned that the furnace was missing, but I was talking to the realtor who had that transaction, and this was about 2 months later. She told me she had gotten a bill from the gas company for $3,000. Apparently, the gas wasn't shut off when the furnace was stolen, and it was still going through the home. Luckily, it was in the summertime, so there was no flames around. But $3,000 worth of gas went out into thin air on that house.
Wow, that's kind of scary. Now, it's very rare in my experience that people will get an inspection and they'll be so disappointed by the inspection report that they decide not to buy the house. But I was curious if you did the inspection for me. I put a house under contract on Ridgeway. It was a purple and yellow house. And when the inspection was done, I ended up not buying the house because the house looked like it was on a slab, but really the house was on a crawl space and it had sunk down in the ground. Do you remember that house?
I vaguely remember that house. It was a number of years ago. But yeah, when I went into that inspection, you had told me the house was on a slab, and which means it's on a concrete slab basically sitting on the ground, and there's nothing under the concrete. When we got to looking at that house, I became suspicious about a variety of things, and found out that there originally anyway had been a crawl space underneath the house, and I'm assuming due to moisture and wood rot the house had actually fallen down into that crawl space, so it no longer existed.
I was curious why it fell down like that. That was interesting. Are there ever do you have any other stories like that, or it's just kind of surprising you go to the house and you have a big surprise?
Well, every now and then I do run into surprises. There was one instance where I went into a crawl space and saw two eyes staring at me. And when I shined my light on them, it appeared to be a raccoon that was not in too good a health. So I assumed it was a rabid raccoon, and I backed out quicker than I went in. This did happen to be in Columbia, and I called the Humane Society, and they came right out and trapped the raccoon and got him out of there. So that was one incident of concern. I was on another home inspection where I wasn't actually doing the termite inspection, but there was a local termite inspector that was there, and he went into the crawl space first. He came back out pulling about a 3-foot-long snake. So, there's things like that that happen. I personally haven't experienced this yet, but there is a home inspector in Columbia that when walking in the attic, stepped in the wrong place and fell through the ceiling of the living room. I'm told that will happen to all home inspectors, but it won't happen and hasn't happened to me yet.
Well, I hope not.
But yeah, there's things that occur frequently.
Yeah, I think my biggest surprise on a house was one I bought this year, and the house was in pretty bad condition. So I decided I just wasn't going to get a home inspection, and then the neighbor across the street came over and she said, "Oh, did you buy that house?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, just so you know, the sewer's not hooked up." And I thought, well, how can the sewer not be hooked up? This house is on city sewer. It's right in town. People were living in the house. It doesn't make any sense. But lo and behold, I called a plumber, and he's like, "Yeah, no, people were using, the sink, the toilet, the washer, the dryer. Everything's been used, but the sewer isn't hooked up." So the crawl space had just filled up with waste. And luckily, by the time I bought it, the house had been vacant long enough that it was mostly dried up. But that was kind of an unpleasant surprise.
There are several homes in Columbia that are not on city sewers. And it's in central part of Columbia where several of them are not on the city sewers. They have septic tanks or something like that.
Yeah, you're right. I had a client call me that bought a house on West Boulevard, and the city limit of Columbia used to be right on West Boulevard, and she was on the other side of the line. And she said she had some sewer problems, and the city came out and they said, well, you're paying for city sewer service, but this is actually a private sewer line, so you're going to be responsible for replacing the line. So that was kind of an unpleasant surprise for her.
Yeah, I know the city is trying to correct those to where they are hooked up to the city system, but it is kind of a long process.
Yeah, I have a friend that lives on Broadway, and she said that they're going to go through and try to connect all those people along Broadway that have a private line, but they're going to have to pay, I guess, half the price, and then the city is going to pay the other half of the price, so it's still going to be costly. Now that's something that somebody might not necessarily find out about on a home inspection, though.
That's true. We do not have any way of determining whether or not they're on the city sewer or they have a private sewer. That could simply be done, though, by calling the city, and they would tell you whether or not they're hooked up.
Yep. Okay. Well, that's good to know. One more question. Why did you decide to become a home inspector?
Well, the past job I had, they were kind of moving in a different direction, and I did not want to go in that direction. And I like the Mid-Missouri area, even though I've traveled a lot. I've pretty much grown up here in Columbia, and I've always enjoyed remodeling. I have a brother that's a carpenter for the university and now a carpenter for the Columbia Public School Systems. We built a couple of houses. His home we built, and it's just something I've always enjoyed. So I thought I'd give it a try.
All right. Well, I'm glad you did. This is Erin Blaze, and thanks for watching The Truth About Real Estate.